So the program today is dedicated by Marilyn and Ed Croman in memory of Frank and Chai Croman, and David and Helen Kaplan, Ephraim Moshe ben Mordechai v'Chaya bat Moshe, David ben Yitzchak v'Henya bat Yitzchak.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. First, before we start, I need to give a shout out to my very first teacher over here, Joyce Buckman, two-year nursery. My very first teacher is here, and it's just very exciting now to both be here in Israel, not in Teaneck, New Jersey anymore. But also to get, I don't think I know most of you here, so I'm really looking forward to learning with you, and thank you so much for having me. I apologize that the source sheet is all in Hebrew. You should know it is just simply text straight from the Torah. We're going to be focusing on one area of the Torah, so if you want to look up on your phone or wherever it is in English also, that's great, and I'll be translating everything. Okay.
Where are we going to be? Which Sefer?
We're going to be in Sefer Vayikra, Perek Tet, Pasuk Aleph, Parshat Shmini. But before that, imagine for a moment Aharon HaKohen. Aharon, Moshe's older brother, Kohen Gadol. How do you imagine Moshe? Sorry, Aharon. I don't know about you, but I imagine him in this very happy-go-lucky, he's Ohev Shalom, Yerodei Shalom, he's chasing peace, he's always looking to, if one person's upset, he's going to, at someone else, he's going to tell them that they're not really upset and that they want to be friends again, and he's going to try and have everyone just be so close with each other and share the love. And it's interesting to think why we imagine Aharon that way when he is the Kohen Gadol. I was speaking to my teacher, Mrs. Rivka Kahan, about it, who some of you might have learned from also, and she was saying, I think the reason that we imagine Aharon in this way is because he's Moshe's older brother. It's hard enough to be Moshe's brother. I mean, that's with all the jealousy in the world, with the competition in the world, it's going to be very difficult to be Moshe's sibling at all, let alone to be Moshe's older brother. What is that going to do to your self-esteem? We're just being real about the world around us. That could be very difficult. And yet, she suggested maybe one reason that we view Aharon the way that we do is because we never even see 1 ounce of that. That's just not who Aharon is. He doesn't view the world that way. He's there. Hashem asked him to support Moshe, and he is by his side every step of the way. But what we're going to be looking at today, when we take a look at Aharon, and him becoming the Kohen Gadol, for the very first time, he is being asked to step up, not as number 2, but as number 1. And Rav Jonathan Sachs points out how difficult that is, right? Just because you're number 2 doesn't mean that you know how to be number 1, right? And any of us who have been, and anyone who's been in a leadership position knows that, the difference between everything being on your head, between the person who's making all of the decisions, who has the full, complete pressure on their shoulders, versus the number 2, who is also very concerned and taking things very seriously as a supportive role and cares a lot, but it is very different. And for the very first time, on the very first Yom Kippur, Aharon is stepping up as that Kohen Gadol, and he is going to be performing the avodah. It's the first time that he's really in that position, and I want to take a look at that. If we take a look, you don't have to take a look at this, I just brought it here for the visual, at our Machzor, at what we read, the Torah reading of Shachrit on Yom Kippur. Now, we could read anything on Yom Kippur, right? Maybe, I don't know what story. We could read the Akedah. We did that on Rosh Hashanah. We could read, I don't know, Yetziat Mitzrayim, but we have a whole holiday for that, right? We're going to read, what do we choose to read on Yom Kippur? I'm sorry?
We could do
Briat HaOlam, that would be amazing. We read, actually, maybe very appropriately, the avodah of what we do on Yom Kippur. And Yishai Ribo has some amazing songs about it, right? That is what we go, and that is what we read. And I want to take a look for a second at the way that it's framed, because framing is everything. Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe acharei mot shnei bnei Aharon v'korvatam lifnei Hashem vayamutu. Right? We start off not just with the beginning of the avodah, but Vayidaber Hashem Moshe acharei mot shnei bnei Aharon. This really intense reminder that Aaron's sons have died. And it goes on to share this whole story in a pasuk. In the first place, the whole story is only 2 psukim, but it narrows it down to 1 pasuk about how they brought a korban that was not asked from Hashem, and they were killed, and they died. And it's with that Aaron's supposed to go and start doing the avodah and get kapara for all of the Jewish people. That's a very strange framing, right? If we're imagining for a moment how Aaron's feeling, how nervous he must be. Ramban, for those that do have the story, he gives an amazing analogy. He says it's like, of course he's going to be scared. He's a bride or a groom on their wedding day, right? This is this is a big deal to him. It's bigger than that, right? It's getting kapara for all of the Jewish people, and of course he's going to be very scared. And yet, for some reason, the Torah chooses to frame this whole thing that we're all going to be doing in just a few days with the death of his 2 sons that happened. It says Aharon. It was 3 parshiot earlier. It was a few parshiot ago in Shmini. Why are we bringing up this part of his story? And with that, I want to take a look at the story itself. Let's go back to the story, what we usually call the story of Nadav and Avihu. But what I'd like to suggest is it's not really the story of Nadav and Avihu. This is really the story of Aharon and the way that he processes the story of Nadav and Avihu. I'll show you what I mean, but you could take a look. If you have the source sheet, source number 2. If you don't have the source sheet, Sefer Vayikra, Parak Tet, Pasuk Aleph, Parshat Shmini. Okay. First, let's give some context. Vayehi bayom hashmini, right? This is going to be the 8th day, finally, the inauguration of the Mishkan. We've spent half of Parshat Shmot just going through the building of the Mishkan and everything that's going to happen. We started off by Yikra and Sav about all of the karbanot and everything that we need to do for this big day. And finally, Vayehi bayom hashmini, this is the big day. The inauguration of the Mishkan is about to happen. Okay. Kara Moshe la'Aaron u'levanav u'leziknei Yisrael. Moshe calls to Aaron his sons. Vayomer el Aaron, Kach lecha egel ben bakar lechata. Okay, he starts and he's going to start giving him the instructions of what he needs to do in order to get going. To start to get going with all of this avodah over here. This is going to be hard for Aaron, no? I know we're used to it. We're used to hearing Vayidaber Hashem Moshe lemor daber el Aaron. But if you think about it for a second, isn't it wild that it's Hashem speaks to Moshe to speak to Aaron? Does Hashem speak to Aharon? All the time. Why doesn't Hashem just speak to Aharon directly? Right? We're tuned into, again, every time the Torah does that, there's some humility, a large amount of humility, that Aharon needs to show. Moshe's telling him what to do. Why doesn't Hashem just tell him directly? Right? So already we're getting into Aharon's mindset. And Moshe says to him that he should take the Egel ben Bakar l'chatat, the Ayel l'chalatzminim, v'hakrev livnei Hashem. And he continues to tell him what to do. And what should the very next words be? Vayas kin Aaron. Let's go, Aaron. Let's do it. Right? This is what we always see. Everything needs to be kasher tzivah Hashem. So let's go. Just to be clear, the story of Nadav and Avihu has not happened yet. This is earlier, right? We should see right away Vayas kin Aaron. And instead, if we skip to Pasuk Vav, Vayomer Moshe, Zad davar asher tzivah Hashem ta'asu. Wait, Aaron, This is what Hashem told you to do. Let's go. Go do it. And for sure, right now, we should see Vayas kin Aaron. Aaron did it. But we get nothing. Pasuk Zayin, Vayomer Moshe el Aaron. Krav el hamizbeach, v'aseh chatatcha v'atolatecha, v'chaper ba'adcha v'ad ha'am, v'aseh korban ha'am, v'chaper ba'adam kasher tzivah Hashem. And again, for the 3rd time, Moshe needs to go and say to him, Aaron, let's go. Go give your korban. Remember, you're gonna get kapara for yourself, for the people. This is a big deal. Let's go. What is this hesitation all about? Right? It's really weird. We know Aaron. He does hard things. Where's that Vayas? What's going on here? And then Farshim talk about it, and I think it's Ramban who has such insight into what's going on here. On the one hand, maybe it's just showing us Aaron's nervous. This is scary. It is scary. Some of us may be scared ourselves going into any Yom Kippur, although it's not Yom Kippur exactly yet. He's certainly trying to get kapara for all of the Jewish people, right? So of course that's going to be hard for him. Maybe it's like was said before, that he's the number 2, and that's also just difficult. This is that first time that he really is stepping up. But Ramban has a third answer.
Can I ask a question?
Yes. What's your name?
Jumped over hay.
Yes.
And it does say Vaikho et Hashem tziva Moshe el pnei Aaron Moed. So who's the Vaikho?
Yes.
That?
They've taken it, but they have not yet given the korban.
Okay, so they've made.
He's hesitating. That's right. He's going there, but for some reason Moshe's like, let's go, Aharon.
Okay.
It says that he hesitated? Like
Good question. It doesn't say that he said, well, I don't know. Does it say or does it not say? Moshe has to tell him 3 times before. Other times in the Torah, Moshe says to him to do something, Vayas Kain Aharon. Vayas Aharon kasher tiva Hashem. Immediately. He has to tell him to do it 3 times. So I think that we are assuming something's happening, right? Emotionally, internally, why is Moshe, or maybe it's coming from Moshe. Maybe there's Moshe's nervous about what's going on today, as we'll see he is very soon, right? Maybe it's coming from Moshe, maybe it's coming from Aharon, but something isn't right. What's going on here? Okay. Ramban comes and he gives 3 answers, but his third answer, I think, is so insightful into what's actually going on in Aharon's head. He says, V'tam davar zeh. What's the reason for this? Ki ba'avur shaya Aharon kadosh Hashem. Aharon was kadosh to Hashem. Exactly the way we just described Aharon. He was he was Aharon HaKohen, right? The ein b'nafsho chait. He had 0 sins. He had nothing. He had no sins. He was such a tzaddik, right? He has no sins. Zulati ma'aseh ha'egel, except for the sin of the chid ha'egel. Haya achid hahu kavu alo b'machshavto ke'inyan shene'amar v'chatati negdi tamid. Right? What was this for him? This was something that was kavua, that was always in his thoughts. Aharon could not stop thinking about what happened that day of the chid ha'egel. Instead of shiviti Hashem l'negdi tamid v'chatati negdi tamid. That is all Aharon can think about. Hayad melo ke'ilu tzurat ha'egel sha'ma'ake b'karparotav. Right? And it's as if he's there and he's trying to give the korban, and what's stopping him? All he can imagine is the chid ha'egel. He's imagining that story happening right in front of him.
And that's the first word that Moshe says to Aharon is kachal ha'egel.
Exactly. What's your name?
Chavi.
Chavi. Okay, Chavi's. That's exactly it. When we're paying close attention to the text, what is happening here? Vayomer el Aharon, back to pasuk bet. Moshe says to Aharon, not just go give this korban and get kapara. Kach lecha egel ben bakar lechatat. Egel lechatat. Hey Aharon, when you want to get kapara for all the Jewish people, what should you do?
Take your sin.
Why don't you take this egel? Yeah, that for a chatat, and why don't you bring it? And Aaron's thinking to himself, what's the plan right now? I'm going to bring the chid ha'egel, basically, right? I'm going to bring this egel, and I'm supposed to get kapara for the Jew, as if he felt something wrong really could happen here. Could this finally be my punishment? Right? He is so scared right now of what's going to happen. There's no way that he thinks he should be the Kohen. He's going to be the person right now getting kapara for all the Jewish people. This just isn't going to work. And Ramban says he is terrified of what's going to be. And if you think about it for a second, yeah.
I was just thinking about also his brother Moshe. When Hashem came to him, he was like, whoa, 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 like give it to,
You're saying it's a family of humility.
Yeah,
like Moshe doesn't want it. Aharon doesn't want it. Neither of them want it.
It's a big thing. I think
for
to
sure.
take on
For sure. Of course, I think all of us wish that we could come to this Yom Kippur with just one thing we did wrong this year, and that's just all we're davening for, right? Meaning the level that Aharon's at, that this is the only thing on his mind. That being said, I don't know how many of us created a sin that was national, that the entire Jewish people was punished for. It also was a big deal, right? Now, what exactly happened with Chid HaEgel? Very unclear. We're not going to delve into it right now. But how much of that was Aharon's fault is a very big question. And to be clear, I'm not here, nor do I know if the text is here, or certainly not Ramban, blaming Aharon. We're just noting what's going on in his head. He feels responsible for it. And if you think about it, what was the Chid HaEgel? It was actually the very first time that Moshe left him alone, and he was in charge of the Jewish people, and look what happened. Mm-hmm. It didn't end well. Exactly what his role was in the Chid HaEgel, we don't know, but certainly he felt responsibility. And what was Aharon's punishment for Chid HaEgel? I don't know. right? The Jewish people are punished or consequentially get the Mishkan, whatever it exactly is that happened. We get our Yigdim Amido and Rachman, right? It's what an intense story from the Torah, arguably the greatest sin that the Jewish people commit in the entire Torah, right? And if you think about Chayim Meraglim, what was our punishment there? I don't know, it was a pretty intense punishment. 40 years in the desert, like that. We get that was bad, and we get it right away. There's a consequence.
Doesn't it say why he doesn't? Isn't that the reason why he doesn't go into the land? Moshe's understood why he doesn't go. Official,
Okay.
There's official,
What's your name?
There's unofficial Sipora.
Sipora.
Doesn't it say that's why he doesn't go into the land?
Barbanel says that is exactly why Aaron doesn't go in, because of Chita Egal. But the Torah itself never tells us that. Right? Barbanel says he doesn't want that Hashem at that moment. The upset, the problem was with the Jewish people. And to come in and blame it on Aaron, so he's not blamed there. But yes, there's an understanding that maybe it is because of this that he doesn't go into Israel. But the Torah itself doesn't tell us that. I'm sorry?
There's the upper obvious reason, and there's the underlying reason.
Yes.
Aaron and Miriam couldn't go in, and Moshe not.
It could be.
Do that to Moshe.
Right.
They all either stay out or they all go in. But if Moshe's going to go, then the others would. But if they're not,
It could be. That's a good theory. Why is it that Aaron doesn't go in? Kaleb goes in. Shua goes in. There's people that go
no,
in.
not those other people. They're his brother and sister. It's a big
Right.
difference. The others are the others. But
That's certainly a suggestion, but we can't argue that it's
That's
shot,
not the
right?
problem.
It doesn't tell us in the simple text that the reason Aaron doesn't go in is because of the Chita
But
Egal.
isn't the purpose of Chet Ego is so that it can be before him all those days when he has to offer a korban, that it should be before, so that he increases in his humility.
Wow, beautiful. I've never thought about that. That's very nice, right? Sipor is suggesting, is it possible that yes, he is the one who did the Chita Egal, and specifically with something like that does look very much like a korban. Yes, he's the exact person who always is going to be getting that kapara for the Jewish people. That's very powerful. It's a very, very good suggestion. Either way, this is very, very hard for Aaron, right? And he just doesn't want to do it. And if we skip down to Pasuk Kaf Bet, we take a look at the result. But I just want to add, the fact that Aaron is never yelled at about Chita Egel is probably really hard for him, right? When you do something really wrong, you just want the person to yell at you immediately, and then it's good, and then they yell, so they should calm down, whatever it is. Right now, I'm joking, not with Hashem, but with Aaron over here, I think that silence is the reason it's in his head. There was never closure. He never had that with Hashem. Hashem tells Moshe, Yad lo hemantim bi, you hit the rock, you're not going into Israel, right? Aaron just doesn't have that conversation. And I think that is part of why, without closure, it's very difficult to move on. And he doesn't know how to handle it. So let's see what happens. The Psukim continue with all of these korbanot, down to Pasuk Kaf Bet. Vayisa Aaron et yadav el ha'am, vayevarchem. You can imagine Aaron, he's there, he's blessing the people. Vayir ma'asot ha'chatat, v'ha'olah, v'hashlamim. Vayavo Moshe va'Aaron el olamoed, vayitzu, vayevarchlu et ha'am. Vayar kivod Hashem al kol ha'am. Moshe and Aaron, Moshe's there also for support. They're there, they come down, they're blessing the people. Vayar kivod Hashem. The kvod Hashem does come. Pasuk Kaf Daled. Vatitze eish milifnei Hashem. And a fire comes down, and this is it. This is the moment. What's going to happen? Will Hashem accept this korban or not? Vatochal al hamizbeach. The fire comes down, it eats, it consumes his korban, at ha'olah, that's a chalavim. Vayar kol ha'am. You could just imagine the Jewish people, they have no idea what's going on in Aaron's head right now. This is a national story. This is just the story of the Hakaman HaMishkan, of the inauguration of the Mishkan, right? But we read in this, as Rabbanit Rimon always talks about, the story behind the story, right? The story behind the story here, if we're reading between the lines, it's not really a story about the Jewish people and their forgiveness and them getting the Mishkan. It's a story about Aaron HaKohen. It's a story about Aaron and his inner world and what's happening with him, right? So this fire comes down, and we can imagine, yes, Vayar Kol Ha'am, the whole nation sees, yeah, they are so excited, Vayaronu, they're singing, they're dancing. When was the last time Aaron saw the people singing and dancing?
At the Egel.
Also with Beit HaEgel. What a tikkun for him, right? How special for him that must have been, that now he's seeing them singing and dancing again, but this time with, again, something physical and a way that they can come and approach Hashem and have that connection with Hashem, but not this time, not with an Egel, not with Avodah Zarah, but this time through the Mishkan. What a feeling this must have been for him. Vayiplu al panehem. I think we often read this. There's a question, what does that mean? They fell on their feet. Were they davening? I literally imagine like Vayiplu al panehem. Moshe and Aharon just like they just like fall on the ground. Like they're just so exhausted. Like this was so much for them. There was so much back and forth. There was so much fear. Vayiplu al panehem. They fall on their faces. Thank God. They are forgiven. Everything, maybe this is it. This is over. Aharon no longer needs to think about this terrible thing that happened. Everything's good. Vayar kvod Hashem v'tochal. Hashem takes his korban. It is received. All right. The end. Right? Except it's not the end. And what I want to read with you next, the next 2 psukim, is where the story actually starts. How much more time do I have? So it'll take 5 more minutes. Right? The very next story, which is really the very next pasuk, I have it here as source number 3, but it's actually just the very next pasuk, is the story that if I were to ask you what's the story in Sefer Vayikra, what would everyone say? Nadav and Avihu. That's the story. But I think when you look at this story in context, the story was never about Nadav and Avihu. Maybe there's a reason the whole story is only 2 psukim. This is a larger story about Aharon and the way that he processes what happens to Nadav and Avihu. The very next pasuk, Vayiklu b'nei Aharon Nadav ve'Avihu ish machtato. Right now, Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, they come with their fire pans. Vayitnu bahem ish vayasimu ala katoret. They put fire on it. They put katoret on it. Vayakriv lifnei Hashem ish sarah. They bring this foreign fire to Hashem, asher lo tzivat otam, which they were not commanded to do. Pasuk bet vatetze ish milifnei Hashem. Right, the exact same wording from 2 psukim earlier. Aharon is experiencing it yet again. Vatitze ish milifnei Hashem. Right, the same wording from pasuk kaf daled. Vatochal, and instead of eating his korban, what happens? Vatochal otam. Vayamutu lifnei Hashem.
What's this mean?
Instead, Moshe and Aharon do exactly what there's hundreds of people trying to understand exactly what they did wrong, but what is clear is Aaron's children, Nadav and Avihu, they bring something to Hashem that he did not command them to do. And when the fire comes, instead of Hashem accepting their korban, their fire pan, the fire consumes them. Vayamutu lifnei Hashem, right? And they're killed. They die before Hashem. Vayomer Moshe al Aharon, and Moshe comes in a very enigmatic pasuk, very difficult to understand the pasuk. Hu asher diber Hashem leimor. This is what Hashem had said to me. Bikrovai akadish. Aharon, through the people who he is closest to, he is sanctified. Va'al panei kol ha'am achabed, and in front of all the people, they achabed. My glory is coming through. Vayidom Aharon, and Aharon is silent. Again, when we read the story of Nadav and Avihu, I think in general, the question we always ask is, what did Nadav and Avihu do wrong? That's generally the shir that everyone hears on Parshat Shmini, right? What did Nadav and Avihu do wrong? But I think when we take a step back and we look at the context, we're asking the wrong question. It's not about Nadav and Avihu. It's about Aaron's response. And is it possible that the Torah is showing us over here, Aharon for one moment has this sigh of relief, but afterwards, one pasuk later, when his children are killed, what is he thinking?
It doesn't go away.
Now I'm punished. My children's death, that was because of me. Now again, God forbid, am I insinuating that is what happened? I'm just noting the way, and a Ramban is noting, the way that Aharon is processing what happened. And you can only imagine for a minute what's going through Aaron's head. Right? If we think about all of the suggestions as to what it was, what were Nadav and Avihu thinking when they gave something that Hashem didn't command? Right? And their suggestions, Yalkut Shimoni famously suggests that they got up there and they said, Matai shtem zakenim halalu mitim, ve'anu minhog et hakal. Source 7 for those who have the source sheet, right? When are these two old fogies going to die, Moshe and Aharon, and we're going to be the ones who take over? And what's Aharon thinking to himself? I didn't teach them respect. That's on me. So much ava, so much oev shalom, verodei shalom. I didn't teach them how Judaism really works. I didn't teach them what their rules are meant to be as Kohanim. And he's blaming himself. And if it's true, as Rashi says, that they went in and they were drunk, so again, Aaron's thinking to himself, I didn't teach them the seriousness of what this is all about. I didn't teach them to use alcohol in the correct way. This is my fault. And if it's like, as the Sifra believes, that they were adding love to love, love to joy, joy to love. So what's Aaron thinking to himself? With all of my Ava, I didn't teach them enough Yira. And my oldest is 6, and I think that's probably the youngest, but the oldest here, that's what I mean. For those who have children who are older, I imagine there is a lot of blame for people, for their children's mistakes. You blame it on yourself. I don't think this is something that is so foreign to us. We can understand a little bit. Meaning, I'm already doing it with a 6-year-old. I can only, and his mistakes are lahavdil to what can come, right? But I can only imagine what that must have been like for Aharon, with everything that they have been through together, watching his children die, and of course viewing that as his own punishment. Okay. I see here that it is time to end, right?
No.
Don't end. No, there's so much here. The story doesn't end there. The story really ends. There's another conversation between Moshe and Aharon where these children aren't doing the right thing, right? They were supposed to burn the korban and they didn't, it's just the very next psukim, pasuk Tazayin, right? That v'hinei sorat vayiksof Elazar v'alei Tamar, and Moshe gets so upset at them. Bnei Aharon hanotarim, right? The Torah refers to them. It doesn't just say that Moshe gets upset at Bnei Aharon hanotarim. It's reminding us the 2 remaining sons. Madua lo achaltam et hachatah b'mkom hakodesh. And Moshe, you can imagine, furious. He's yelling at them. Right? Moshe just lost his 2 nephews also. And he's also responsible for all of this going well for the Jewish people. There's so much pressure, and there is this beautiful conversation that happens between Moshe and Aharon, where Moshe sends a few psukim yelling at Aharon that he doesn't, after what just happened, and you didn't follow the word of Hashem, why aren't you doing let's end this day without any more disasters. And Pasuk Yotet, Aharon says, Vayedaber Aharon al Moshe, Hein hayom hakrivu et chatatam ve'et olatam lifnei Hashem v'tikrena oti ka'ela. You saw what happened today, v'tikrena oti ka'ela. You saw what happened to me today. V'achalti chatat hayom. If I would have gone and eaten the korban, which is generally something we do in happiness, hayitav be'inei Hashem. Aharon brings in this new idea, not about kasher tzivah, what Hashem commanded or didn't command, but he brings in the idea of what's right. Hayitav be'inei Hashem. Would this, I'm an onin right now, I'm mourning right now, is this really what Hashem would have wanted from me? Vayishma Moshe vayitav be'inav. And Moshe hears, and it's good in his eyes. Even though just a minute ago we were talking about how Nadav and Avihu did something kasher lo tzivah Hashem, the very next story, which people don't read, is actually a story of someone not doing exactly as Hashem commands, and yet Moshe and Aharon come to the conclusion that this is what Hashem would have wanted. Okay. When we go into Yom Kippur, we start off in Shacharit. The Torah reading that we read is by Deber Sham Moshe Acharei Mot Shnei Bnei Aharon. We're reminded, we're thrown back to this story. There's something about it that we're meant to be bringing with us into our Yom Kippur. And when I think about this story and what Aaron's going through, it's not, again, just this technical story of the avoda. Even if we connect to the Yishai Ribo song, it's not just about the avoda. It's a story about Aharon. It's a story about a father who has lost 2 of his children and how he responds. A story which, unfortunately, in Efrat, we know only too well. Right? It's a story of a father who is of a Jew, of a person who's coming into Yom Kippur with doubt and with confusion and with shame and with questions, and he's not coming into the avoda with, coming to go just give a korban. It's so much more than that. It's a story of 2 brothers supporting each other. When he's down, Aharon, Moshe, his brother, is right there to try and give him that chizuk and give him that support. Right? There's an amazing Ramban also, because I think Ramban here, he's just psychoanalyzing Aharon the whole way through, where Vitam Vayidom Aharon, right? He comments when it says Vayidom Aharon, that after the death, and Moshe comes along, and he says something, we don't know exactly what, to give him some kind of support, and Aharon is silent. And everyone analyzes, what does that mean that he was silent? Ramban comes and he says, Shehaya bocheh b'kol. don't think for a second that Aharon was just silent. You think he didn't have a response to the death of his 2 children? No, he was crying. He was a mess. It was very, very difficult for them. Shahaya b'chav hakol ve'az shatak. After Moshe says something to him, again, I really don't understand exactly what it is to give him that sort of chizuk, ve'az shatak. No, then he was silent, because of whatever it was that Moshe was able to say to him. Again, I think that we go into Yom Kippur, and yes, Ashamnu, Bagadnu, we are thinking about the national story, we are thinking about the Jewish people gaining kapara, but it's so clear that amongst the national story, we are also meant to be thinking of our own personal story, right? We're supposed to be coming in, thinking about Aharon, that Jew, and how we relate to him too. I think that when we go into Yom Kippur, again, in just a few days right now, we're not meant to be going in thinking about, one dimension of our lives. We're meant to be coming in a multidimensional way, recognizing that everyone around us has so much going on in their lives. Everyone coming in is coming in with their entire history, with everything that's happened in their past, with themselves, with their families, with their parents, with their grandparents, with their hopes and their dreams. That is the way that we enter into Yom Kippur. It's not just about the technical avodah, and the Torah constantly reminds us of that. It's about us as people and everything, all of the emotions and the dreams that come with us into our lives. Seems like we have a 5-minute break.
Thank you, Margot.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I guess the circle time is out.
It's all about the circle time. Yes. All the circle time. Yeah.
Definitely.